5. Engage. Change brainwave parameters.
Brainwave pattern altered.
Welcome to Hollywood Stuntmakers. On this episode, we'll take a look at the history of special effects. We'll discover how the art of special effects has progressed over the years. Hollywood's greatest visual effects experts talk about their most memorable achievements. And we'll find out why the effects in movies like Star Wars and Terminator 2 have set new standards for the motion picture industry. All this and more on Hollywood Stuntmakers. Visual effects experts have been creating dazzling images since the early days of film. Today's effects artists have refined methods used for nearly a century and have taken the art of visual effects to new heights. The early film pioneers are credited with inventing the techniques that Hollywood's greatest visual effects experts still use today. Miniatures have played an important role in cinematic special effects. For the 1936 film Things to Come, a futuristic miniature city was constructed in intricate detail. In order to add actors to the scene, cameraman Eugene Shufton placed a mirror at a 45-degree angle in front of the lens. This made it look as if the actors situated off-screen were actually inhabiting the miniature city. This technique came to be known as the Shufton shot and is still a staple of modern-day special effects. Here's visual effects artist Harrison Ellenshaw to explain.
Somebody once said it's all done with mirrors, and I think they were right. Anyway, we have a mirror, and this, ironically, is used. We're just setting up a shot that is a Shufton process by which you reflect something into the scene. And what you do is you can scrape off the surface of a mirror so you can reflect only part of something off to the side into the scene. The wonderful thing about film is that it's really a two-dimensional medium. It's just like closing one eye, and you don't know if something's close or far because you don't have the depth perception. And film doesn't have the depth perception, and the third dimension in film is always an illusion created by all the cues that you have going for you. You know small things are usually further away, and you know things further away have less contrast and all those kind of things. But you look at a piece of film and there's no depth to it. It's just a piece of celluloid.
French film pioneer and former magician Georges Méliès is the father of special effects in the movies. For his 1902 film A Trip to the Moon, Méliès wanted to show a rocket ship landing on the moon. In order to achieve this effect, Méliès stopped the camera, placed a model rocket on the moon, and started the camera again. This simple technique is an early example of how editing can be used to create a special effect. Many of the techniques that Méliès pioneered have become standard contemporary special effects. This scene from Terminator 2 features a real tanker truck that has been intercut with a quarter-scale miniature truck. Modern advances in miniature design and editing make it difficult to tell which is the real tanker and which is the model.
Don't stop! Go straight!
To find out more about this scene, we talked to Gene Warren Jr., who won an Academy Award for his special effects work on Terminator 2.
When the tanker swerves and starts to roll over, a medium shot of Arnold starting to flip is a puppet. The wide shot, when it starts to flip with intercuts, is an actual full-scale tanker that was rolled that is also a puppet, but that's Stan Winston's full-scale puppet. Then you cut back to another wide shot when it completes its fall and hits, and the puppet is flying over in the air. That, again, is a puppet. Then there are a couple of full-scale shots where the principal photography crew took the full-scale tanker, laid it on its side, put it on dollies, and pulled it with cables from trucks. Side angle sliding into the doorway was miniature with a puppet of Arnold. And the shot of the truck where Arnold leaps off towards camera, hits the ground and rolls, was the puppet that was go motioned. I think the puppet was in five, maybe six, 5 or 6 cuts, and we had about 13 or 14 shots in the whole sequence that were miniature.
For Gene Warren Jr., special effects is a family tradition. His father, Gene Warren Sr., won an Academy Award for his special effects work on the 1963 classic Time Machine. Gene's son, Chris, assisted his father on Terminator 2. Here's Chris Warren to tell us more about the miniature truck.
It's a quarter-scale model. We did quite a few shots with it. We rolled it over onto its side. It slid along the floor, hit the wall, broke in half, and then spilled out liquid nitrogen onto the floor. Well, at the time when we started the job, it took about 3 to 4 guys, two to 3 months to build it. Everything was built from scratch. Gene wanted us to make it sturdy because we knew that we would be taking this through a lot of abuse. We had to rig it to do that, which took about 35 different takes. It would flip over onto its side and it would slide. It slid all the way down the track. The truck itself was dragged by a motor on cables. As soon as it hit the wall, it snapped in half. All the mechanics of it was driven by hydraulics. Now, of course, all that was done in different pieces. So we would first do the flip over, do it several different times until we finally got that working. And then we would re-rig the truck again just for the sliding portion of it. And we would re-rig the truck again for when it broke in half. So each individual piece was a total different setup, you know, sometimes days before we could go on to our next shot.
A technique called perspective photography is often used to make miniatures appear larger on the big screen. Visual effects artist Brick Price is one of Hollywood's top miniature designers. His company, Wonderworks, has designed miniatures for films such as Star Trek, the motion picture, and The Abyss.
Well, we have a technique here that we call Wonder Vision, which is really 90s version of foreground miniature photography. And that is the old kid trick of holding your hand out and having your buddy look like he's standing in your hand and he's actually 20 feet away. What we do is the camera's basically a one-eyed idiot. It cannot perceive depth, so if we take away depth perception from the camera, then we can fool it in a lot of different ways. By placing a model in the near ground, we can give visual clues to the camera that makes it think that this model is further away than it actually is. So we could integrate the model into a live-action set piece. Typically, we'll take a building like a skyscraper or something and integrate it into a city line. And it's impossible to tell that that is a model in most cases because the lighting is interactive. You're using exactly the same lighting that you're using on the set. The film stock is the same. It's developed at the same time. There's no grain difference at all. There's no matte lines to deal with.
George Lucas is the father of modern-day special effects. His Star Wars trilogy took special effects to new heights. Lucas's effects company, called Industrial Light and Magic, also introduced us to a new generation of visual effects. Many of today's top visual effects artists worked in conjunction with Lucas to create the special effects in Star Wars. Harrison Ellenshaw was a matte painter for the film.
The original concept for Star Wars was included the idea of an effects facility. Well, at the time, there were no real effects facilities as there are today. And so George Lucas felt that it was important that somehow he gathered together a team of people who could set up a place and provide the effects for a film called Star Wars. I was contacted at that time to see if I would do some matte paintings for Star Wars, and I said yes, I'd be very interested, knowing that this was the man who'd done American Graffiti, and I thought it'd be kind of fun. And they said it's going to be a B-movie, science fiction kind of thing. Well, at Disney at the time, I wasn't working on that type of thing, and I saw this as a little bit of, not necessarily a challenge, but something interesting to do. Well, when I first went out there, and I went out and I worked nights, I basically moonlighted at what was called then Industrial Light Magic, and it was in Van Nuys. And you would walk into this place, and it was very informal, to say the least. The screening room was a projector in the room. There were some couches that were, taken from Goodwill or directly off the street. But, as the old saying goes, somebody said, well, don't give up your day job if you go to work on the Star Wars, because who knows how that's going to do. And the success of Star Wars, many people at the time said, that film was so great because of the effects. Wrong. It's a great story.
Dennis Muren has won 7 Oscars for his special effects work. Muren, like Ellen Shaw, contributed to the special effects work in Star Wars.
Ever since I was a kid, I was always excited about putting these images together, these pieces together to make these scenes. The scenes that you can't see in real life, that are just too incredible or fantastic or far away. You can't get to them to see them. And I don't know what it is. It was just always something that this has driven me to want to do this work and put in, these long, ridiculous hours we do. Movies are part of a bigger thing. The work we do is a few minutes in a 2-hour movie. And it's important that that entire movie be viewed as one whole experience, that the audience doesn't get distracted. There's a danger in this business of the special effects dominating the story. And one of my jobs is to remind my colleagues all the time that what we're doing is we're making one small part of a big movie. For Star Wars, my son, who's 5 years old, is discovering them now for the first time. And I haven't seen them since they came out. So I've kept a distance on them, and now I'm going through the series and learning them one at a time, actually through a kid's eyes sitting right next to me. And as I was doing them, I couldn't, I was too close to it to tell, but seeing them now, there's just an incredible imagination at work and an incredible transportation to another world, and this incredible feeling that you were on this ride whether you want to be or not.
Visual effects artist Richard Edlund won an Academy Award for his work on Star Wars. He also created a motion control system that gave movement to the miniature space vehicles. Here's Richard Edlund to explain.
Star Wars came along, and I had the opportunity to build a full-fledged system up from scratch, basically, because when I started there was nothing but a card table and a telephone on it. So we had to acquire equipment to building pretty high-tech solid-state memory that enabled us to do motion control, which was the whole key to making the shots look like they did for Star Wars. Your edges are defined by the technology that you have available, and there are certain limitations that are there. And essentially, it's like an old Chinese adage from Confucius, where you take the disadvantage and you make it work for you. And that, I think, is like one of the axioms that we always use, is that if you have a disadvantage, there's got to be some way of turning it to your advantage.
It took the combined talents of visual effects artists to create the groundbreaking effects in Star Wars, making this film a milestone in the evolution of special effects. It's become almost routine to shoot a film in various locations all over the globe. But in the early days of film, budgets dictated that everything had to be shot on the back lot. In order to create these locations, Hollywood calls on matte painters. Visual effects artist Harrison Ellenshaw's father, Peter Ellenshaw, pioneered the use of matte paintings. Today, Harrison Ellenshaw carries on the family tradition. Here's visual effects artist Harrison Ellenshaw to explain.
The beginning of matte painting occurred simultaneously in Europe and in the United States. A man by the name, I believe, of Hall was doing matte paintings, glass paintings, whereby he painted on a piece of glass, set it up in front of the camera. It was a castle on a hill, and you could see through the camera and see the painting sitting on the hill at the same time. At the same beginning of the century, a man by the name of Percy Day, who is my father's stepfather, so he's my grand stepfather, was doing the same thing in Europe. He went to France and did this many times. And he had great success with it. People were very happy with the illusion he could create.
Here's matte painter Justin Brandstetter.
Basically what's happening here is we have the live action rolling. We have people walking down a road, but the main reason why we're doing a matte painting for it is you can see there's really not much happening right here in the background.
It is the matte painter's job to add these elements to a scene and create a visual landscape that otherwise doesn't exist.
Basically what I'm doing right now is just laying in some clouds. It's going to be a pretty dramatic shot, but that's what's great about the painting, is that it really doesn't matter how it's shot. You can really, stage it how you like it. If you want whatever area you want to be different, it's just a matter of painting it in, and you can pretty much do anything.
This is what the matte looks like after it has been composited into the scene. As you can see, matte paintings like this one can add scope and drama to a scene. Mattes also allow filmmakers to create scenes that are not possible to shoot using real locations. As we've seen, most visual effects work is the result of hundreds of hours of painstaking work by effects specialists. Although many of these techniques are still done by hand, much of today's effects are created with a computer. Computer-generated special effects are used in the 1992 release The Lawnmower Man. This film explores a relatively new technology called virtual reality. We spoke to Mark Malmberg of Chaos Incorporated to find out how computers were used to create the special effects for the film.
My description of virtual reality is probably a little different than most people, but really what people understand as virtual reality with the helmet and the glove is a very natural evolution of media technology. And so in my mind, you can go back to a cave painting or whatever, and that's a representation of something that otherwise would not have been part of that reality. That painting enables you to enter somebody else's vision and to experience what someone else has experienced.
In order to create this alternate reality, specially designed computer software was used. This presented a unique challenge to Malmberg and the special effects crew at Chaos.
Each scene that we created for Lawnmower Man had very definite technical challenges. One example is the particulation scene, which a lot of people are curious about. And that was a scene which didn't necessarily use new and unknown technologies, but it was a case where the animator was able to use the technology that we had in a very creative way, used our 3D animation software to create a sort of particle system with texture mapped objects that whirled away. And that, from a technical standpoint, it's a use of existing technology to do something that wasn't existing.
To create this effect, the actors were first photographed in front of a blue screen. The actors' images were then digitized by computer and composited into the scene.
One of the scenes which I actually believe to be have been one of the more challenging scenes was the shots that Hayden Landis, one of our animators, worked on, which portray Job's point of view when he's receiving the treatments. One animator had to spend 6 months in front of a screen making these shots where he was flying down into this spiral vortex of sacred geometries and strange symbols.
This scene shows us Pierce Brosnan's point of view through the virtual reality apparatus. In order to create this effect, visual effects technicians first created computer-generated wireframe models of the various elements in the scene. The frames are then covered with computer-generated skins that provide a surface to the wireframes. The surfaces are then smoothed out and highlights are added. The results are a stunning example of computer-generated special effects.
A lot of the symbols and structures in those shots were actually have the intent of having a physiological effect on the viewer. In Lawnmower Man, we did make very definite attempts to have strong impact on the viewer through whatever was happening in each scene. In these scenes where Job was experiencing the treatments and the bombardment of icons and sacred geometries, we did everything we could to make that a real experience for the viewer. And the spiral, which is the foundation of those scenes, is a hypnotic, transcendental sort of form, and it induces a definite alteration of your state of mind. If you sit and look at a spiral turning, it's hypnotic. And so we did as much as we could in those scenes to really make them have a physiological impact on the viewer.
The Lawnmower Man, with its computer-generated images, represents the future of special effects in the movies. Visual effects artists can now use computer technology to create images never before seen in any film. Films like The Lawnmower Man have only scratched the surface of computer animation. As special effects enters a new era, computers will continue to be an exciting and powerful tool in the creation of new and innovative special effects. Well, that's our look at the history of special effects. Special effects have clearly come a long way since a trip to the moon. One can only imagine what today's visual effects artists will conjure up next. It's a wrap. See you next time on Hollywood Stuntmakers.